Bret Hart wrote about what we just saw, the hardcore stuff, recapping from last week. And he wrote about this in his article. He said, the holidays, I hardly even remember Christmas and New Year's because of the colossal pulverizing I've been through since the last time I wrote. The Starrcade match with Goldberg was extremely punishing. For days, I pulled myself up feeling like I'd been beat around like a Samsonite suitcase. My match with Chris Benoit was very physical. Then I found myself in there with Jerry Flynn, a world-class kickboxer turned wrestler who I'm amazed didn't break his own feet with how hard he was kicking me in the ribs. This past Tuesday, I ended up in a hardcore match with Terry Funk and woke up with a big goose egg on my head from when he dumped me out of a trash bin. Hitman hardcore in a trash bin? Ah, yes, the times they are a-changing, and don't blame me. I signed an autograph for a guy who asked me the ever-present "is it fake" question, and I was stunned to realize that even I'm not sure I know the answer anymore. Is what fake? The lump on my head sure is real. I've been doing everything I can to help WCW compete in the ratings war with the WWF, and lately sometimes I find myself going against my own personal beliefs in order to be a team player. I ask myself, how far do I compromise in order to help WCW beat Vince McMahon, or do I find a personal victory in not bending at all? I'm having a harder time than people think finding that answer. What I do know is that in an effort to come up with their own version of the WWF's winning formula, WCW hired the WWF scriptwriters right out from under them. The phrase scriptwriter has no meaning in wrestling until very recently. People have always asked if wrestling is scripted, and the honest answer to that was no. I never saw or even heard of a script for a wrestling match. But now the first thing they do when you arrive at the arena is put a script in your hand. And it's not a script that tells you how to wrestle, although I fear that's not far off. It's a script for all the soap opera stuff, which has taken precedence over the wrestling matches. I find myself memorizing lines and rehearsing scenes. I want to make it very clear to anyone who might still be wondering, and I know there are a few of you, that I never really tried to kill Sid Vicious by running him over with a monster truck. That was fake. But I could have killed myself screeching out of an arena in a speeding car in another scripted scene. That was real. I'm flooring it, tearing out of backstage with no time in the scene to put on a seatbelt, and it turns out an icy rain had coated the ramp. There I am, careening out of control towards a huge tractor trailer filled with television equipment. In the last moment, I was somehow able to swerve to safety. About a week later, I was awakened in the middle of the night by the dawning realization that I had a concussion from when Goldberg kicked me in the head for real, and I've been walking around in a haze ever since. Otherwise, there's no way I could have agreed to race a car up a narrow ramp flanked by not only expensive equipment, but by the way, what about other people who happen to be around? Then look at Goldberg, who was scripted to punch through a glass car window, ending up nearly cutting his forearm off, and now he'll be out of action for quite a while. It's actually sickening to me because in wrestling's proper context, it would have never happened. I'm a wrestler, not a stuntman. Even a stuntman has to have time to strap himself in. I'm a professional wrestler and I get paid to wrestle in a ring. What am I doing fighting in the back, taking falls on concrete, and doing stunts and speeding cars? And the really scary part was when I realized I'd done exactly what Owen had done. I made a mistake, and I knew I'd done something really stupid. And for what? I was hurt, weary, and all I wanted to do was go home for the holidays, so I didn't even see it coming. I made it clear to WCW I will never make that mistake again. I realized I just read off a lot from Bret there, but I felt like that was well timed because he's talking about, and this is his column recapping what happened on the 3rd. 1 week later, you're going to leave this same show with a concussion. And he's talking about what happened to Goldberg, what happened to him. And we know what's going to happen to you. And we're going to talk about that a little later. But I'm wanting to know, did you hear all this or read all this from Bret back then? And now, with a little bit of age on you, with the benefit of hindsight, when you hear Bret's words now, with 25 years, what do you make of it?
And to be clear, this was his weekly or bi-weekly column in the
Calgary Sun. Yes.
In the Calgary Sun, which always, Bret, old Beaner, as we affectionately call each other through the years, some movie that he referenced all the time. But, my relationship with, again, I'm going back to, and this may sound repetitive to folks that have listened to my world through the years, being a second generation wrestler, me, Bret, and Owen connected immediately on so many things. And, Bret, I don't want to say was a generation before me, but he's a little bit older than myself. And, his artistic ability, which made a lot of people laugh. But when I used to read his articles, he's not just well-spoken, his articles had a flow to them. This particular article, I didn't see at the time, Conrad, or didn't read at the time. I read this after the fact, but now looking at it, like you said, through 2025, it was in so many ways, we've talked about at the top of this program, kind of the evolution of our industry. And there was a time, and I know that I'm going to get this wrong and whatever it may be, but when the Attitude Era exploded, Vince Russo and then Ed Ferrara, Vince and Ed were a lot of ways the very first script writers, and then they left, and then Brian Gerwitz and a whole host of others came on the writing team through the years. And, to this day, WWE has a Raw team and a SmackDown team and all NXT team and writer. Through the years, my dad would give bullet points on promos and all that. So the term script writer, that I think that's the thing that I really took out of that article that offended Bret, and the stunt man. He has a lot of firsthand experience on things that, going from the concussion to getting behind the wheel of a car to having another hardcore match. I can't say that kind of stuff wouldn't happen today. But man, oh man, there's so many more safeguards with all team medical and, at WWE as well as AEW, there are so many resources, and we have, counseling programs and all that kind of stuff. This is the year 2000. The wrestling world just did not operate this way, but but we were in an incredible transition period, which you're talking about, because we did have script writers and we did have word for word promos that were written out. And then we were doing, I'll say, the shock TV with the cars and Goldberg putting his fist through a glass that just ripped his forearm 15 different ways. That was super dangerous. So, it's cool that we're looking back on it 25 years later. But the thing that comes to mind that I said at the top, way too many chiefs, in the kitchen cooking things. And we were in a crazy kind of transition period because we were moving from that, I'll call it pro wrestling era to really without script writers to such a micromanaged program that I think now things have subsided out in all companies, but it was a tough time, no doubt.